Today's video is a book review, and this is a segment where we look at tutorial style art books and test them out to see if the tutorials are worthwhile and if they're comprehensive and get you where you need to go. If there is a specific book or publication relating to art that you would like to see reviewed, please leave a comment down underneath the video and it will be put into consideration for our next book review video. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Colour Cave, where we like to play with art stuff. My name is of course Jem, and today we are going to have an in-depth look at this book by Mark Crilley. If you're unfamiliar with Mark Crilley, please come out from under whichever rock you've been living. Mark Crilley, as far as I'm concerned, Mark Crilley's like the granddaddy of YouTube art. He's been on YouTube forever and he's a very multi-talented artist. He made some money doing graphic novels in a sort of manga anime style, but he's also very good at realism as well. And as you can see, obviously he can draw cute novels too. This book was actually gifted to me by a caver. You know who you are, thank you so much. And I've had this book for quite a while. And I feel this is worthy of a review simply because of the sort of concept and the way it's executed. So the two pencil method, it claims to be the revolutionary approach to drawing it all. And as the name suggests, there are two pencils here. So the book itself is slightly shorter than A4 format. It's a soft cover, full colour book. On the front here we have some indications of what we may be able to achieve. And on the back there is the usual blurb, some endorsements from various people, a Bailey J, illustrator and YouTube art vlogger. And it tells you a little bit about the books that Mark has, other books that Mark has published on the back here. But anyway, enough about that. So the thing about this book is that Mark Crilley is basically saying you can learn to draw anything with two pencils if you use this method. So the book itself is split up into sections by subject, which that really appeals to me. I know that won't be everyone's cup of tea, but I really like it because some people can be really great at drawing animals and not so good at drawing people. So you can actually pick out specific chapters. It's not a tutorial book where you have to work cover to cover. So just to go over here, there is a short introduction. Mark is explaining why he has decided to publish this book and basically tells you the two pencil method requires a graphite pencil, and he doesn't even state what grade. These in the picture are a number 2, so like an HB pencil, and a black coloured pencil, and that is it basically. He does talk a wee bit about paper and things like erasers, but apart from that, it's actually quite a nice introduction. So the first chapter is simple objects. So we really are starting with the basics here. This is just a lovely way to ease yourself in. Let's see if you've been away from art or maybe you're brand new to art. You can see each tutorial is laid out step by step. There are really nice clear photographs, but there is actually a good chunk of text under each step to help you along the way. And also there is there's a sort of afterword in each section as well as obviously the finished object too. Now this format goes all the way through the book from start to finish. The thing that strikes me most and the thing I like most about this book is Mark encourages you to use your own subjects. So this book is actually helpful in a twofold manner. If you are not a confident artist or you're just starting out and you're not used to drawing from life, you can follow his examples and use his finished objects that he uses in the tutorials as your reference image, and you can draw from the reference image. If you're a little bit further into your art journey, such as me, we can take the steps here and apply them to our own subject matter, and that's something that I am personally really enjoying doing just now, being that little bit further along on my art journey. So you can actually use each tutorial in this book twice. You can use it using Mark's images as your reference and also repeat that exercise with your own, maybe with a different light source, that kind of thing. So really, really good stuff here. So we can see some examples here in the simple objects. We've got an egg, we've got a mushroom, a takeout box as well. So there's a little interim here, there's a little break, and he talks about pencil techniques. So he's talking about the angle of the pencil here, and that's just slotted right in there in between the rest of these tutorials. So if we move in, the second chapter is still lifes. So again, you can see exactly the same format, really simple, really clearly laid out. And we're moving on to slightly more complex objects here. And this one here is a prime example. So this is like 2 objects. And what he's saying there is you don't necessarily have to use these specific objects. It says just arrange comparable objects that you have on hand, ones that have simple shapes that you can draw relatively quickly. So he's encouraging you to pick up other things as well. So now we have, we're still sticking with 2 objects, but we're becoming more advanced. And one thing you'll learn quite quickly, if you don't already know, Mark Crilley has a fondness for crumpled paper. It makes a great drawing subject, to be fair, when you're talking about light and shadow. And he's demonstrated that beautifully here. So he's touching on lots of different techniques, but still trying to keep these relatively straightforward. So there's 3 things in this image, but he's talking about reflections here. So that's another technique that he's involving in his 2-pencil method. Glass and ceramics again, so a little bit about reflections there. And you can see these are getting steadily more complex as we go along. So here's another sort of inserted section on composition as well in between these tutorials. And we're moving into still lifes here with a full background. So he's taken a lot of time there, a lot of time. And then we have a section on landscapes. I would say this section doesn't get progressively more complicated. He just covers a lot of different subject matter. So here he's gone into a single tree here. And you can see the consistency with these tutorials. They're all exactly the same. And another technique page from, again, this sort of surrounded with blue. So little chunks of information that you can pick up and store away for later. Seascapes, deep into the woods. And then we have a chapter on animals. So yeah, and here's our little corgi from the front. Absolutely adorable. The final polishing stage is not like that. I love this tiger here, look at his little face. Okay, chapter 5. This chapter definitely shows off Mark's personality. Mark loves to travel. I think this comes from the fact that he is a great visitor to Japan. His wife's Japanese and they go all the time. And he, you know, a lot of his drawings, his travel drawings are from Japan. So he's got a little Japanese shrine here. So I think it's quite an odd chapter in terms of you know, in terms of actually having it as a separate chapter in a book, because things like the Norwegian pathway, that would fit into landscape. But you know, it's actually quite a nice sort of touch to the book. Again, another sort of technique section here. A beach, see that's, again, I would say that's a landscape. A Venetian canal, Taiwanese city street. This is great though, look at this. This is really nice. And the dreaded chapter for Jem, portraits, it does actually cover human portraits as well. And again, you can see there's only 6 steps. I don't know if that would help me much, to be honest, but he goes through children, teenagers, and also things like a dual portrait here. I do believe this is his parents. I'm almost sure this is his parents. Anyway, yeah, okay, so there's photo reference here. A bit on photo reference, a self-portrait as well. Again, this is a very young Mark Crilley in this self-portrait, but look at the detail, and again, only 6 steps. So you can see there, this is quite a comprehensive book in terms of the subject matter. We do have a nice conclusion at the end as well as an index. It seems to cover a lot of the subject matter that most people would want to learn to draw. And it seems almost too good to be true that Mark Crilley is telling you that you can draw any of these things with 2 pencils. That's a pretty tall order, and I don't think he would have published this book if he wasn't confident in his own techniques and giving his experience and his talent level, as well as the hard work that he's put in. I have full confidence in this, but as we all know, there is only one way to see if this actually works or not, and that is to test it out. Now, much as I would like to do something from the portrait section, because that is my weak area in terms of being an artist, I hate drawing people, more to the point I hate drawing faces, and it's something that I avoid destroyed like the plague and I really have no interest in for my own personal art journey. I think something like this would be, although there's only 6 steps, obviously there is a level of detail and you have an area to cover within each step, and I don't think that's going to fit in with the duration of a YouTube video. This is something that I would like to pursue in my spare time at some point, just to prove that I can do it. So we're going to go for one of the more simple tutorials, and weirdly, before I decided to film this video, I had picked up a punnet of mushrooms at the shop and they were reduced, and I thought that would be really good to have for lunch. So I have got one of my mushrooms, it's sitting like, it's kind of like up on a ledge, more at my eye level, because I want to be able to create something similar to Mark's. I will not be using Mark's picture as a reference, so I will show you. I've taken a photograph of my mushroom from my viewpoint just now, so I'm going to pop that up in the corner of the screen here for you periodically as we do this exercise, so that you guys can see what I'm seeing while I'm drawing, if that makes sense. And I think that is the most fair and accurate way to judge a tutorial like this, because it's the way that I would use it. I wouldn't want to go straight from the book, because I'm perfectly capable of copying something off a page. The challenge is being able to do it from life and create something that resembles this but isn't this mushroom. So I'm just going to go and grab my 2 pencils, and we're going to go through our 6 steps and see if we can get a really cool little mushroom, and see if this tutorial is actually accurate and worthwhile. Okay, so I am ready. I have my kneaded eraser, which happens to match my sketchbook. Wasn't intentional, but never mind. I have a black coloured pencil, and unsurprisingly, it's black polychromos by Faber-Castell. That is just a pencil that I really like. And I was looking for a standard HB pencil in the spirit of Mark Crilley's book, and ironically it's something that I don't have. The lead in this mechanical pencil is however HB, so I'm going to stick with that. And normally for a sketching pencil I would use probably an F pencil, but that's really just for structure lines, and I'm not going to be able to do any shading with this. And the graphite pencil in all of Mark's exercises in this book involve shading with your graphite pencil. So he doesn't specifically state what grade, but he uses a number 2 pencil, like so common or garden school pencil, which tends to be an HB. It's really good. My next free page is a left-hand page, so that means I can overlap the book here. See what I'm doing. So step number 1 to draw our mushroom, which just happens to be right here, says, using the graphite pencil, draw the mushroom's outline as you see it before you. This stage may be easier for you than it was in the previous lesson, since mushrooms don't require the same perfectly curved line work as an egg. That's a really good point. So the first drawing, the first exercise is an egg, and I thought that was pretty heavy going for the first one, but here we go, at least he's acknowledging that. Still, take your time and try to capture the mushroom's basic shape and structure, noting any unusual characteristics you see. Okay, so we're just going to, so he's got his demonstration there, and it is just the outline, and some of the detailed parts he's marked in with some pencil lines. So that is basically what we're going to do too. It might take me a little bit to get proportions right here, but we shall see. I've got the stock comes down. There's actually still a bit of dirt attached to it. I'm going to take that off. Okay, mine's got lots of little bits sticking off it, which we're supposed to be keeping the characteristics of, so I suppose I should put a few of these in. There is this rough edge which looks to me like the bottom of the cup, and it's not a straight line by any means, but it is. This is just not straightforward at all. So the one thing that Mark doesn't mention in this first stage is keeping an eye on proportions. He's just saying draw what you see and everything will be okay. My actual mushroom is pretty lopsided, but I think I've exaggerated that, and I actually think that this underside is a lot larger than it maybe should be. But by the same token, I don't think I'm too far off the mark here with this, so I'm just going to leave it because why not? So yeah, that's something that he doesn't mention, and I think he's assuming that you will have the basic sort of fundamental ability and all, but he's kind of contradictory with that because there are parts of the book where he shows you techniques that I would assume would be fairly basic knowledge, and yet there seems to be this sort of disconnect there. But that's just an observation. Dark patch there, so I'm just going to like make a note of that, so to speak. I noticed that in his preliminary sketch as well, he's actually put the cast shadow down. So I suppose I should be doing that too. And mine comes towards me. Right, okay. So that's step number 1 we've managed so far. Step number 2, add shading throughout the drawing. You can see I used a somewhat rougher approach than last time. Well, let's take a quick look at last time just so we know what he's talking about. Okay. Oh, okay, yeah, right. So his pencil strokes are much quicker here by the looks of things. Add shading throughout the drawing. You can see that I've used a somewhat rougher approach than last time, laying the pencil strokes in a quick and confident way. Some artists prefer this approach. A bold start gets you deep into the drawing right away. Note though that none of my line work is super dark. You may need to erase things at a later stage, so light lines are essential. Okay, so rough shading then. Yeah, this for me is, I am very meticulous. I like to take my time and be really careful. So this is new for me. This is new. So I suppose we better start with the shadow underneath, hadn't we? And in terms of our mushroom, there's going to be lines in there. I have a lot going on this way. So this is a really alien way of sketching to me. I have to say I'm finding this very odd. It doesn't feel right at all. Like it really doesn't. But I'm going to trust in the process here. So yeah. I do notice though that even in his preliminary shading here, he has actually made a lot of differentiation between how dark areas are, even though he hasn't made any of them super dark. So it's clear that I'm going to have to put a little bit more work in here. And that means for me as well, I'm going to have to go a bit steadier because yeah, I'm not very good at this. I'm not, this isn't something that I would do. Like, see these big spontaneous lines? This is like, no! And my hand's screaming like, what are you doing? Like, you're right at the start of a drawing. Why? Why would you do that? So yeah, this feels really strange to me. Really strange. So yeah, this is quite dark in here. And so is this part, and so is this part. I really don't want to. I'm scared. I'm not really, but yeah, there's just... so I suppose I should put in some of these darker parts here as well. There's like a little spot just above her. I've also realised as well that that's not really round enough there. There we go. Okay, let's move on to step 3 before I change my mind. Continue to build up shading with your graphite pencil. I made my pencil strokes follow the surface of the mushroom as I did with the egg. That's called cross contour lines, and I have done that automatically. You can see I've gone with the shape of the dome, so that's good. I've obviously learned something in the years that I've been drawing. In keeping with my loose, sketchy approach, my pencil strokes were fast and spontaneous in this step. I may shade quickly, but I'm still very careful to observe what's in front of me. The added areas of darkness you see in drawings here are all based on what I saw in real life. Okay, so the step 3 is just basically building up the shading. So I think I'm going to take my time a little bit more here, and I'm probably not going to use the kind of strokes that he was using. I will try and stick with that in the spirit of what we're trying to do here, but I think these strokes for me are going to be a little bit less wayward. That's actually lighter in there than that. And again, in here it's more texture than shading because the light's hitting this part really harshly, so there's actually not much in the way of shading. I think because it's white as well, because of the light, it kind of looks a bit overexposed. Like, I can see that there are crenellations and there's texture there, but it's because I know that they're there. It's not because I can see it, if that makes sense. And there's a common phrase that says, draw what you see, not what you think you see. So I know that those texture marks are there, but to the naked eye, I can't see them because they're white. So I'm trying not to put them in here, but it is really difficult. That's a problem for me. And I mean, I am known, especially in graphite drawings, that I do tend to bend the rules a little bit, and I do put in things that aren't technically there. But again, I'm not really a hyper-realistic graphite drawer, or you know, I don't go for hyper-realism, but I like to keep fairly close to the subject. So trying not to bend the rules here is, this is interesting. Like, this is actually a really good exercise for me. I feel like I'm not being wayward enough with my, I am trying though. See, although I'm not, like, I always think I'm quite brave when it comes to art and trying stuff, but I think just because I am quite meticulous, and like Mark Crilley, he's been drawing for like probably almost as long as I've been alive. Maybe he's not just quite that old, but you know, wayward and spontaneous and confident pencil strokes are obviously going to be much more successful the more you do it. And when you've been doing it for like 30 odd years, it's obviously going to be better than mine. But that's the whole point of these, is to practice these kinds of things. So I really don't like this cross-hatch style of shading in graphite either. I will do this in ink all day long, but it's very strange to me in this sort of situation, and to be honest, it feels quite odd. Step number 4. Step 4 says, bring out the black coloured pencil. Woo! How exciting. And start beefing up the dark areas. Keep things fairly loose at this stage. Damn it. But remember that the permanence of the coloured pencil lines means that you need to use a bit more control than earlier. Yes, secretly happy. Don't forget to give some love to the shadow. Well, we've already been doing that, to be fair. Added darkness will lend crucial realism to the final image. Okay. So I'm thinking about the darkest areas now, and my first port of call is the actual contact point where the mushroom is touching the surface, because I need a much better, more defined area there. Now, I know that Mr. Crilley he works in left to right strokes, like back and forth strokes. That's just his style. That's just what he does. I like to work in circular motions, but I do try and kind of like go between the two. So I'm going to try and embrace this sort of, you know, this style that he has. I feel like these lines should be coming down the way though, because the bulk of this light that's casting the shadows are actually coming from behind this mushroom. It's funny how in this situation, being out my comfort zone with the type of shading, I am instantly happier with a coloured pencil in my hand. I don't know, maybe it's like a comfort blanket, I don't know. So that is the darkest part of my drawing, like there's absolutely no doubt about it. Okay, so let's move into this mushroom now. And again, I'm deliberately picking out the darkest parts. And that is in here. There's this little white edge here along the bottom as well, which just must be the way the light's shining through the bottom part of the stock there. That's quite interesting. Yeah, see, I'm trying to make these lines. I'm actually adding texture in here. This is probably a step further on. I could maybe zoom you in a little bit more now. I'm actually starting to add texture here just because on this stock part, that's kind of what's going on. So, okay, so in this part here now, the shadow is very soft. And it's very curved as well. Casting this shadow. At least I got the angle and everything of it right with my graphite to begin with. Well done, Jem. Pfft, that doesn't happen very often. Yeah, because that kind of like flows into that. I've probably exaggerated that a bit too much, but. And this, I mean, this shading here, this is fairly uniform. So I'm just trying to even this out a little bit now. Again, there's a little bit more light on this top side here as well. Less so, like this is actually pretty clean, this area. I would say it's probably just not completely white though. Okay, so let's see what step 5 brings. I'm interested to see where this is going now. Step number 5, as you head towards completion, you need to switch back and forth between your graphite and coloured pencils. Kind of already there. Using the former to build up further subtlety to the shading. For example, I noticed an area of reflected light in the upper right hand section of my mushroom. A place illuminated by light bouncing off the table. That's kind of what's happening in here. I tried to capture it in my drawing. Such changes can play a big role in conveying a look of solidity. Well, this is the thing, like I feel this is very disjointed and it's a very loose shading for me, but because the item is pale, there's only so much you can do with a graphite pencil and a black pencil. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tighten up my shading now and make it less bitty. That's kind of where I feel like I'm at now. So like just bring this towards maybe looking like a bit more of a finished drawing rather than just a selection of wayward scribbles, which is kind of the way I feel about it now. Yes, I just want to kind of smooth everything out here. I'm actually quite satisfied with the bottom, like with the stock part here, and I don't think I want to do much more, to be honest. I just want to make sure I've got this paler area. Like this part seems too pale, and my area here with the, you know, the strange sort of shredded patch doesn't seem to be dark enough. Okay, I'm happy with that. Let's see what step 6 says. Step 6 says, now that you are nearing the end, are we? You can turn your attention to the little details. Hey! Texture! I observed little flaky variations in the mushroom surface, so I added those to my drawing with both my graphite and coloured pencil, depending on how dark I wanted the spot to appear. Note that the intense areas of darkness where the mushroom touches the table, for those I allowed myself to push all the way down on my coloured pencil, producing a true black. Now see, by doing that, that creates a great amount of contrast there. Again, the mushroom is quite pale, it is not white, so if you make your darker parts dark, it makes your lighter parts look lighter, but they're not white. So contrast, and I'm going to show you the same thing here, because although we can see quite clearly, because there's this nice sort of like white edge on the actual mushroom, we can see where it's sitting on the table. But if I start to press down here, because I mean there's plenty of layers of pencil there now, we've been at this long enough. But if I do that and really darken that edge down just where it's touching on the actual table, look how much the edge of that stalk pops out. Like this is, yeah. This is exactly what we want. And again, there's a couple of bits that really stand out. Obviously, I'm not going to put every single, you know, little detail in, but there's a couple of pieces there that are quite interesting. So we'll pop that in. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to call it done. As far as being a mushroom drawn in graphite goes, it's a mushroom drawn in graphite. I am quite happy with that. What do we think to the tutorial? I like that the steps are very clear and straightforward, and they're very compartmentalised. What I mean by that is they're very rigid. So the first step is just your outline. The second step is initial shading. You know, everything's quite regimented, which makes it really easy to follow. But I feel like it's not a cookie cutter, although it is a cookie cutter technique, in that there's 6 steps in every single tutorial. But Mark has made a really solid effort, and you can tell that he's taken time over each of these drawings himself and really thought about what he's doing and thought about the important parts that he needs to convey without making these overly complicated. Now, to be fair, even for a simple graphite drawing, that's quite a complicated drawing, and I think he's done a great job of condensing the most important information and putting it into these paragraphs, and I think the balance is absolutely perfect. I can't say that they would be that consistent across every single subject matter, but I have read through quite a few of these tutorials and the consistency is pretty good. Obviously each step's going to be different. You know, what you're doing with dog hair is going to be a bit different from you know, like landscapes and things, you know, but I feel as if he's distilled the most important information and made the tutorials easy to follow and concise. So from me, Mr. Mark Crilley absolutely gets a thumbs up, and I love the simplicity of the fact that he does not encourage you at all to go and spend money. He wants you to get a black coloured pencil, a normal drawing pencil, get yourself an eraser and some paper, and that is literally it. And I don't think you can do much better than that. I do think this is, the other reason I really like this book is I feel it's a book for every skill level. One of the things that I find quite limiting about tutorials is it's usually aimed at a specific experience level, and while that's kind of the whole point of a tutorial, it's really nice to have something like this, a tangible book that is accessible to every level. And if you are good at, you know, if you're an experienced artist, you will be able to pick up tips from this and apply them to your own work, and possibly try out subject matter that you're maybe not so well versed in. Say, as I said at the start, for me, I could really do with going through the entire portrait chapter of this, as in human portrait, because that is something that I absolutely steer clear of, and I have no doubt in my mind that I would learn a lot from this book. The downside to this is I feel that Mark assumes actually quite an advanced level. If you're an absolute beginner, you're going to struggle with this, because he bypasses the fundamentals. And when I say fundamentals, I mean things like proportion, which I mentioned in that particular tutorial, basic shapes, how to sketch out basic shapes. So if you're an absolute beginner, I think that you may struggle with this. I'm not saying that this wouldn't be helpful, but you're not going to be turning out artwork like this without having some sort of foundation. So that's just a point to note. But on the whole, I think this is an excellent book, and say the fact that you don't need any fancy supplies is absolutely top notch. So from me, this definitely gets a Cave thumbs up. The Cave stamp of approval for sure. I hope that this has been informative for you all, and it's perhaps persuaded you one way or another whether or not this book is a sound investment. There's absolutely packed with loads of stuff to do in here. I would be very, very surprised if this didn't feel like good value for money, especially from one of the greats like Mark Crilley. As I said before, if you haven't seen any of his stuff, get over to his YouTube channel. He's published loads of books as well. He actually has instructional books on manga drawing as well, if that's something you're into. I'll leave all those links down in the description for you. You can check them out at your leisure. And I just want to thank you very much for watching. Thanks for coming and hanging out. And I will see you back in the cave really soon for another video. So have a great day, everyone, and bye-bye for now.